The screaming started before anyone could process what they were seeing. Brielle Thompson, 12 years old and confined to her wheelchair since birth, had her wrists yanked behind her back as cold metal cuffs clicked around her small hands. The Jefferson Elementary School Science Fair, moments before a celebration of young minds and creativity, had transformed into a scene of chaos and horror. "Stop it. You're hurting her." The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, Brielle's lab partner, his face flushed with panic as he watched his friend's face contort in pain. The handcuffs were clearly too large for her delicate wrists, already beginning to chafe against her brown skin. Officer Hoa Nguyen, badge gleaming under the gymnasium's fluorescent lights, stood rigid behind Brielle's wheelchair. Her jaw was set in a hard line, eyes scanning the crowd of increasingly agitated parents and students. The suspect was observed tampering with multiple exhibits. This is standard protocol for suspected vandalism. But there had been no vandalism. 20 minutes earlier, Brielle had been the picture of excitement, carefully adjusting the papier-mâché volcano she and Marcus had spent weeks perfecting. Her project, titled The Science of Explosive Reactions, sat proudly on table 7, complete with a detailed explanation of chemical reactions and a working model that had impressed both judges and visitors. The gymnasium hummed with the energy of discovery. Dozens of students moved between tables, explaining their projects to parents, teachers, and the occasional science fair judge. Brielle's presentation had drawn a consistent crowd throughout the morning. She spoke with passion about the chemical reactions that create volcanic eruptions, her hands gesturing enthusiastically as she described the interaction between baking soda and vinegar that powered her demonstration. The sodium bicarbonate reacts with the acetic acid to produce carbon dioxide gas. She had explained to Mrs. Patterson, the school librarian, just an hour before the incident. The gas buildup creates pressure that forces the mixture up through the volcano's opening, simulating a real eruption. Mrs. Patterson had smiled warmly. "Your mother must be so proud, sweetheart. I heard she's running for school board next month." Brielle's face had lit up. "Mama says education is the foundation of everything. She wants to make sure every kid gets the same chances I do." That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now. The same gymnasium that had buzzed with intellectual curiosity now echoed with shouts of protest and the sound of cell phones being raised to capture the unfolding injustice. Officer Nguyen had arrived at the school that morning as part of a routine security check. The science fair, while generally peaceful, drew large crowds, and the administration had requested additional security presence. She had walked through the gymnasium twice, observing the various projects and noting the locations of exits and potential safety hazards. It was during her third walkthrough that she noticed something that troubled her. Brielle was leaning forward in her wheelchair, reaching toward another student's project on the adjacent table. The project, a working model of a water filtration system, had several components that appeared to be loose or misaligned. "Excuse me," Officer Nguyen had said, approaching Brielle's table. "What are you doing over there?" Brielle had looked up, startled. "Oh, hi. I was just helping Sarah fix her filter. One of the tubes came loose, and the water wasn't flowing properly." Sarah Martinez, a quiet 6th grader, had nodded quickly. "She was helping me. My project wasn't working right, and Brielle knows a lot about science stuff." But Officer Nguyen's expression had hardened. In her 15 years of law enforcement, she had developed what she considered a keen eye for suspicious behavior. Something about the interaction struck her as wrong, though she couldn't articulate exactly what. "You need to stay at your own table," she had said firmly. "Students aren't supposed to be touching other people's projects." Brielle had looked confused. "But I was just helping." The teachers said we should help each other if someone needs it. That's not what I observed. Officer Nguyen had replied, her voice taking on an official tone. I saw you manipulating components of another student's project without supervision. The exchange had attracted attention from nearby parents and students. Marcus had moved closer to Brielle's wheelchair, his face showing confusion and concern. Officer, Brielle was just being nice. She always helps people with their science projects. That was when the situation had escalated beyond reason. Officer Nguyen, feeling challenged by what she perceived as a coordinated effort to deceive her, had made a decision that would reverberate through the school community for months to come. I'm going to need to detain you for questioning, she had announced, reaching for her handcuffs. You're suspected of tampering with school property. The gasps from the crowd had been audible. Several parents had immediately begun filming with their phones, while others had started calling out protests. She's just a child, one father had shouted. She's in a wheelchair, for God's sake. But Officer Nguyen had been unmoved. In her mind, she was following proper protocol. Suspected vandalism, even by a minor, required documentation and potential detention. The fact that the suspect was disabled didn't change the nature of the alleged crime. As the handcuffs clicked around Brielle's wrists, tears began streaming down her face, not just from the physical discomfort, but from the humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of her peers, teachers, and their families. I didn't do anything wrong, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing commotion. I was just trying to help Sarah. The crowd's reaction intensified. Parents who had been casually observing science projects suddenly found themselves witnessing what many recognized as a clear case of excessive force against a disabled child. The gymnasium, designed for celebration and learning, had become a battleground of competing narratives about authority, justice, and the treatment of vulnerable students. Dr. Jennifer Williams, the school principal, had been in her office reviewing budget reports when her secretary burst through the door. Dr. Williams, you need to get to the gymnasium immediately. There's a situation with one of our students and the police officer. By the time Dr. Williams reached the scene, the confrontation had already spiraled beyond any reasonable measure. She found Brielle handcuffed in her wheelchair, surrounded by a crowd of increasingly agitated parents and students. Officer Nguyen stood behind the girl, her hand resting on her radio, clearly preparing to call for backup. Officer Nguyen, what's happening here? Dr. Williams asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the obvious tension in the room. I have a juvenile suspect in custody for vandalism and tampering with school property. Officer Nguyen replied, her tone official and detached. I observed the suspect manipulating another student's project without authorization. Dr. Williams looked at Brielle, whose tears had left tracks down her cheeks. The girl's wrists were clearly chafed from the oversized handcuffs, and her whole body shook with quiet sobs. Brielle, sweetheart, can you tell me what happened? Dr. Williams asked gently, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Through her tears, Brielle managed to explain her version of events. She had noticed that Sarah's water filtration project wasn't working properly, and she had offered to help fix the loose tube. She had done similar things throughout the morning, sharing her knowledge and enthusiasm with other students who were struggling with their presentations. Sarah Martinez, who had been standing nearby in shocked silence, suddenly found her voice. She was helping me. My project was broken, and she fixed it. She didn't do anything wrong. Other students began chiming in, confirming that Brielle had been helpful and encouraging throughout the morning. Marcus stepped forward, his young voice carrying surprising authority. Brielle always helps people. She's the smartest kid in our class, and she likes to share what she knows. She would never break anyone's project. The crowd of parents had grown larger, drawn by the commotion and the increasingly obvious injustice unfolding before them. Many had their phones out, live streaming the incident to social media platforms, where it was already beginning to attract attention from the broader community. Mrs. Chen, Marcus's mother, stepped forward. "Officer, I've been watching these children all morning. That little girl has been nothing but helpful and kind. She's clearly done nothing wrong." Officer Nguyen's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. This is a police matter, and civilian interference won't be tolerated." The word interference sent a wave of indignation through the crowd. Parents who had been content to observe were now becoming active participants in what they recognized as a fundamental injustice. Mr. Rodriguez, whose daughter Maria was presenting a project on renewable energy, stepped forward with his phone held high. "This is going out live on Facebook. The whole community is watching this." Indeed, the live streams were attracting hundreds of viewers, with comments pouring in from community members expressing shock and outrage. The hashtag #YashFreeBrielle was already beginning to trend locally, shared by parents, teachers, and community activists who recognized the incident as emblematic of larger issues around race, disability, and the treatment of children by authority figures. Dr. Williams found herself in an impossible position. She had a police officer who believed she was following proper protocol, a clearly innocent student who was being traumatized by the experience, and a crowd of parents who were increasingly angry and vocal about what they were witnessing. "Officer Nguyen, I think there may be a misunderstanding here," she said carefully. "Our students are encouraged to help each other with their projects. What you observed was likely just normal collaborative behavior." But Officer Nguyen was unmoved. "Dr. Williams, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know suspicious behavior when I see it. This student was clearly tampering with another student's project, and, when confronted, she and her accomplices attempted to cover up their actions with a fabricated story." The word accomplices sent another wave of shock through the crowd. The idea that a group of 12-year-olds presenting science projects could be characterized as criminal conspirators seemed so absurd that several parents began laughing in disbelief. That laughter seemed to further agitate Officer Nguyen. "I don't find this situation amusing. We have a potential crime scene here, and I need everyone to take this seriously." It was at that moment that the gymnasium doors burst open, and Angela Thompson strode into the room with the commanding presence that had made her one of the most respected parent leaders in the district. As PTA President, she had attended countless school events, but nothing had prepared her for the sight that greeted her now. Her daughter, Brielle, sat handcuffed in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face, while a police officer stood behind her like she was some kind of dangerous criminal. The crowd of parents and students parted as Angela approached, their faces reflecting a mixture of sympathy and anticipation. Angela Thompson had built her reputation on being measured, diplomatic, and solution-oriented. She had navigated countless conflicts between parents, teachers, and administrators with grace and effectiveness. But seeing her disabled daughter treated like a criminal shattered any pretense of diplomatic calm. "Take those handcuffs off my daughter right now," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Officer Nguyen looked up at Angela with the same official demeanor she had maintained throughout the incident. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. Your daughter is in custody for suspected vandalism and tampering with school property." Angela's eyes flashed with an anger that those who knew her had rarely seen. My daughter is 12 years old, disabled, and was participating in a school science fair. The idea that she represents any kind of criminal threat is absolutely absurd. The confrontation between Angela and Officer Nguyen became the focal point of the room. Here were two women, each accustomed to authority in their respective spheres, locked in a battle over the treatment of a child that would define the community's response to issues of justice and accountability. Mrs. Thompson, I understand your concern, but I have a job to do, Officer Nguyen said, her tone remaining official despite the obvious tension. Your daughter was observed tampering with another student's project. When questioned, she and several other students provided conflicting accounts of the incident. Angela's response was swift and pointed. My daughter was helping another student whose project wasn't working properly. That's called kindness. Officer Nguyen, it's called being a good person and a good student. It's certainly not a crime. The crowd murmured approval, and the live streams continued to attract viewers and comments. The hashtag #JoshaFreeBrielle was now trending not just locally, but beginning to attract regional attention, with education advocates, civil rights organizations, and disability rights groups sharing and commenting on the ongoing incident. Dr. Williams, recognizing that the situation was escalating beyond her ability to manage, made a decision that would later be scrutinized by the school board, the district administration, and the broader community. Officer Nguyen, I'm going to need you to remove the handcuffs from Brielle immediately, she said, her voice carrying the authority of her position. This is a school function, and I'm responsible for the safety and welfare of all students on this campus. Officer Nguyen's response was immediate and firm. Dr. Williams, you don't have the authority to interfere with a police investigation. If you attempt to obstruct this arrest, you could face charges yourself. The threat against Dr. Williams sent another wave of shock through the crowd. Parents who had been content to observe were now actively taking sides, with many beginning to loudly voice their support for the principal and their opposition to the officer's actions. Angela Thompson stepped closer to Officer Nguyen, her voice dropping to a tone that carried more menace than any shout. Officer, I want you to understand something very clearly. I am the PTA President of this school. I know every parent in this room, every teacher in this building, and every member of the school board. I also know the police chief, the mayor, and several members of the city council. What you're doing here today is not just wrong. It's career-ending. The threat was clear, but Officer Nguyen's response suggested she was unmoved by Angela's connections or influence. Mrs. Thompson, threats and intimidation won't change the facts of this case. Your daughter committed a crime, and she needs to be processed according to proper procedures. It was Marcus Chen who broke the stalemate with an observation that cut through the adult posturing and got to the heart of the matter. Why are you doing this to Brielle? She's the nicest person in our whole school. She helps everyone with everything. She even helps kids with their math homework during lunch. His words, spoken with the simple honesty of a child, seemed to crystallize the absurdity of the situation for everyone present. Here was a 12-year-old disabled girl, known throughout the school for her kindness and academic excellence, being treated like a dangerous criminal for the act of helping a classmate. The live streams had now reached thousands of viewers, with comments pouring in from across the state and beyond. Civil rights lawyers were offering their services. Disability rights advocates were calling for investigations, and education policy experts were using the incident as an example of the need for comprehensive reform in how schools handle conflicts and involve law enforcement. But in the gymnasium, The focus remained on one small girl in a wheelchair, handcuffed and crying, while adults debated her fate and her character as if she weren't there to speak for herself. That's when Brielle herself finally found her voice. Through tears, and with a strength that surprised everyone present, she looked up at Officer Nguyen and spoke with a clarity that cut through all the adult arguments and explanations. I help people because my mama taught me that's what good people do. I help people because I know what it's like when things are hard, and you need someone to care about you. I help people because that's how you make the world better. I don't understand why helping someone means I'm a criminal. The gymnasium fell silent, except for the quiet sobs of several parents and the continued clicking of phone cameras, capturing every moment of the confrontation. Brielle's words had articulated something that all the adult arguments had failed to capture: the fundamental moral question at the heart of the incident. Officer Nguyen, for the first time since the incident began, seemed to hesitate. The confidence that had marked her actions throughout the confrontation appeared to waver as she looked down at the small girl whose simple statement had exposed the profound injustice of the situation. Angela Thompson seized the moment. Officer Nguyen, you have a choice to make right now. You can continue down this path, which will end your career and traumatize an innocent child. Or you can acknowledge that you made a mistake and make it right. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for Officer Nguyen's response. The live streams had attracted thousands of viewers, many of whom were sharing the feeds and commenting on the obvious injustice unfolding in real time. Dr. Williams, recognizing that the situation had reached a critical moment, stepped forward with a compromise that she hoped might de-escalate the confrontation. Officer Nguyen, I've reviewed the incident with several witnesses, and it's clear that Brielle was engaged in normal, helpful behavior that we encourage among our students. I'm prepared to take full responsibility for any misunderstanding that may have occurred. But Officer Nguyen's response suggested she was unwilling to back down from her position. Dr. Williams, with all due respect, you weren't here when the incident occurred. I observed suspicious behavior, and I'm required to investigate and detain individuals who may have committed crimes. The word crimes in reference to a 12-year-old girl helping a classmate with a science project seemed to galvanize the crowd. Parents who had been quietly observing now began voicing their opposition more loudly, with several calling for the officer to be removed from the school grounds. Mrs. Patterson, the school librarian who had spoken with Brielle earlier, stepped forward with a quiet authority that commanded attention. Officer Nguyen, I've worked at this school for 23 years. I've watched thousands of children grow and learn in these halls. Brielle Thompson is one of the finest students I've ever had the privilege to know. She tutors struggling students. She volunteers for every school event, and she treats everyone with kindness and respect. The idea that she would vandalize or tamper with anything is absolutely preposterous. Her testimony was followed by similar statements from other teachers and staff members who had observed Brielle's behavior throughout the morning and over the course of her time at the school. The picture that emerged was of a student who was not only innocent of any wrongdoing, but was actually exemplary in her conduct and character. The weight of this testimony seemed to have an effect on Officer Nguyen, who for the first time began to look uncertain about her actions. The confident authority she had displayed throughout the incident began to waver as she realized the extent to which her judgment was being challenged by people who knew Brielle far better than she did. Angela Thompson, sensing the opportunity to press her advantage, stepped forward with a proposal that would test Officer Nguyen's willingness to acknowledge her mistake. Officer Nguyen, I'm going to make this very simple for you. Remove those handcuffs from my daughter right now, and we'll consider this a misunderstanding. Continue to pursue this ridiculous course of action, and I guarantee you'll be facing a federal civil rights lawsuit by the end of the week." The legal threat was serious, and everyone in the room understood its implications. Civil rights lawsuits against police officers for the mistreatment of disabled individuals, particularly children, had become increasingly common and increasingly successful. The presence of dozens of witnesses and extensive video documentation would make such a case extremely difficult to defend. Officer Nguyen's response suggested she was beginning to recognize the precarious position she had placed herself in. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand your concerns, but I can't just ignore what I observed. There are proper procedures that need to be followed." Angela's response was immediate and uncompromising. "The proper procedure is to treat children with dignity and respect. The proper procedure is to investigate before you accuse. The proper procedure is to use common sense and basic human decency, none of which you've demonstrated here today." The crowd's murmur of agreement was audible, and the live streams continued to attract viewers and comments from across the region. The incident had clearly struck a nerve with people who recognized it as emblematic of broader issues around the treatment of disabled individuals and the overzealous application of law enforcement in school settings. It was at that moment that Dr. Williams made a decision that would define her leadership and the school's response to the crisis. She stepped forward, took out her phone, and began dialing a number that everyone recognized as significant. "I'm calling Superintendent Martinez," she announced. "This situation requires immediate intervention from the district level." The mention of the superintendent sent another wave of tension through the room. District-level involvement meant that the incident would be formally investigated, documented, and potentially lead to policy changes or disciplinary actions that could affect everyone involved. Officer Nguyen, recognizing that the situation was escalating beyond her ability to control, finally made a decision that she hoped would allow her to maintain some semblance of authority while avoiding the worst consequences of her actions. "I'm going to remove the handcuffs pending further investigation," she announced, reaching for her keys with obvious reluctance. "But I want it understood that this investigation is not over." The relief in the room was palpable as the handcuffs were removed from Brielle's wrists. Angela immediately moved to her daughter's side, examining the chafed skin and providing the comfort and support that the girl had needed throughout the ordeal. But the removal of the handcuffs, while a victory, was not the end of the confrontation. The crowd of parents and students who had witnessed the incident were not satisfied with a simple reversal of the officer's actions. They wanted accountability, explanations, and assurance that such an incident would never happen again. Marcus Chen, who had stood by his friend throughout the ordeal, stepped forward with a question that crystallized the concerns of everyone present. "Officer Nguyen, why did you think Brielle was doing something wrong? She was just being nice to Sarah." The question, asked with the simple directness of a child, seemed to expose the fundamental flaw in Officer Nguyen's reasoning. She had observed an act of kindness and somehow interpreted it as criminal behavior, a mistake that suggested deeper problems with her judgment and training. Officer Nguyen's response was halting and defensive. Sometimes things aren't what they appear to be. I have to be vigilant about potential problems, even when they involve children." Angela Thompson's response was swift and pointed. "Officer Nguyen, what you need to be vigilant about is your own biases and assumptions. My daughter was helping another student, and you saw criminal behavior. That says more about your mindset than it does about her actions." The accusation of bias hung in the air like a challenge that Officer Nguyen was clearly unprepared to address. The implications were serious, suggesting that her treatment of Brielle had been influenced by factors beyond the simple observation of behavior. Dr. Williams, recognizing that the confrontation was reaching a point where it could become even more destructive, stepped forward with a proposal that she hoped would provide a path forward for everyone involved. "I think we need to take a step back and allow cooler heads to prevail," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her position. "Officer Nguyen, I think it would be best if you left the premises while we sort this out. Mrs. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you privately about how we can address this situation appropriately." But Angela was not ready to let the matter drop with a simple private conversation. The incident had been too public, too traumatic, and too clearly indicative of broader problems for it to be resolved behind closed doors. "Dr. Williams, I appreciate your offer, but this isn't something that can be handled privately," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who understood the political and social implications of the situation. "This incident has been witnessed by dozens of people and broadcast to thousands more. It requires a public response and public accountability." The live streams had indeed reached thousands of viewers, with the hashtag #JustFreeBrielle now trending across multiple social media platforms. Civil rights organizations, disability rights advocates, and education policy experts were sharing and commenting on the incident, using it as an example of broader systemic issues that needed to be addressed. The pressure for a public response was intensifying, and Dr. Williams realized that the incident could not be contained or resolved through normal administrative channels. The school, the district, and potentially even city and state officials would need to respond to the public attention and outrage that the incident had generated. Officer Nguyen, recognizing that her position was becoming increasingly untenable, made a decision that surprised everyone present. Instead of leaving quietly, as Dr. Williams had suggested, she stepped forward and addressed the crowd directly. "I want everyone to understand that I was doing my job as I understood it," she said, her voice carrying a defensive tone that suggested she was not fully acknowledging the mistakes she had made. "I observed behavior that I believed was suspicious, and I followed proper procedures for investigating potential crimes." The response from the crowd was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Parents who had witnessed the entire incident began shouting challenges to her characterization of events, with several pointing out that helping a classmate could not reasonably be characterized as criminal behavior. Angela Thompson stepped forward with a response that captured the sentiment of everyone present. "Officer Nguyen, you didn't follow proper procedures. You followed your own prejudices and assumptions. You saw a disabled black girl helping a classmate, and you decided she was a criminal. That's not police work. That's bias." The accusation of racial bias was explicit and serious, suggesting that Officer Nguyen's actions had been influenced by factors beyond simple observation of behavior. It was a charge that could have serious consequences for her career and the department's reputation. Officer Nguyen's response was immediate and defensive. "Mrs. Thompson, I resent the implication that race or disability status influenced my actions. I treated your daughter the same way I would treat any suspect in a similar situation." But Angela's response exposed the fundamental flaw in that reasoning. "Officer Nguyen, that's exactly the problem. You saw a 12-year-old disabled girl helping a classmate, and you treated her like a criminal suspect. The fact that you would treat any child that way is the problem, not the solution." The confrontation had reached a point where it was clear that no simple resolution was possible. The incident had exposed fundamental differences in perspective about justice, authority, and the treatment of children that could not be resolved through discussion or compromise. "Dr. Williams, recognizing that the situation required intervention from higher authorities, made a decision that would define the school's response to the crisis. She stepped forward and addressed the crowd with an announcement that surprised everyone present. "I'm calling an emergency meeting of the school board for tomorrow evening," she announced. "This incident will be fully investigated, and we will take whatever actions are necessary to ensure that our students are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The announcement of an emergency school board meeting sent a wave of satisfaction through the crowd. It represented the kind of official response and accountability that they had been demanding, and it suggested that the incident would be taken seriously at the highest levels of the school system. Angela Thompson, recognizing that she had achieved a significant victory in forcing official action, stepped forward with a statement that would define the community's response to the incident. "I want to thank everyone who stood up for Brielle today," she said, her voice carrying the emotion of a mother who had watched her child be traumatized and then defended by her community. This is what happens when good people refuse to stand by and watch injustice occur. Tomorrow's school board meeting will be the beginning of changes that will protect all of our children. The crowd's response was enthusiastic, with many parents and students expressing their intention to attend the school board meeting and continue advocating for accountability and reform. Officer Nguyen, recognizing that she had lost control of the situation entirely, made a final statement that revealed her continued failure to understand the gravity of her actions. "I hope everyone understands that I was trying to do the right thing," she said, her voice carrying a tone of self-justification that suggested she still believed her actions had been appropriate. Sometimes doing the right thing is unpopular, but it's still the right thing. The response from the crowd was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Parents and students who had witnessed the incident began shouting challenges to her characterization of handcuffing a disabled child as the right thing, with several pointing out that protecting and nurturing children should be the right thing for any adult in a position of authority. Angela Thompson's final response to Officer Nguyen would be remembered and quoted in the extensive media coverage that followed the incident. Officer Nguyen, "The right thing would have been to see my daughter's kindness and celebrate it. The right thing would have been to recognize that a child helping another child is something to be encouraged, not criminalized. The right thing would have been to treat a 12-year-old disabled girl with the respect and dignity she deserves. You did none of those things, and that's why you're facing the consequences you're facing." With that, Officer Nguyen left the gymnasium, her departure watched by dozens of parents, students, and teachers who had witnessed an incident that would be talked about, analyzed, and used as an example for years to come. The science fair, which had been intended as a celebration of learning and discovery, had become a demonstration of community solidarity and the power of ordinary people to stand up against injustice. The projects and presentations that had been interrupted by the incident were gradually resumed, but the energy and focus had shifted from individual achievement to collective action. Brielle, still shaken by her experience, but surrounded by the support of her mother, friends, and community, managed to complete her presentation about volcanic eruptions. The demonstration, which had been interrupted by the confrontation, drew an even larger crowd when it was resumed, with parents and students showing their support for the girl who had been wronged. Marcus Chen, who had stood by his friend throughout the ordeal, helped Brielle with her presentation, their partnership demonstrating the kind of collaborative spirit that had been criminalized by Officer Nguyen's actions. The emergency school board meeting, held the following evening, drew a crowd that exceeded the capacity of the meeting room. Parents, students, teachers, and community members came to demand accountability and reform, transforming what could have been a routine administrative proceeding into a powerful demonstration of community engagement and democratic participation. Angela Thompson, speaking as both PTA President and Brielle's mother, delivered a presentation that outlined not just the specific incident, but the broader issues it represented. Her speech, which was live-streamed and widely shared, became a rallying cry for education reform and civil rights advocacy. The school board's response exceeded the expectations of many attendees. They voted unanimously to implement comprehensive training for all security personnel, establish clear protocols for interactions with students, and create an oversight committee to monitor and address future incidents. Officer Nguyen, who had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, was eventually transferred to a different assignment that did not involve interactions with children. The incident became a case study in police training programs and a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing biases and assumptions to influence official actions. But the most significant outcome of the incident was the transformation it sparked in the school community. The science fair had been intended to celebrate individual achievement and academic excellence, but the confrontation had demonstrated something even more important: the power of ordinary people to stand up for what's right and protect the vulnerable among them. Brielle, whose kindness and intelligence had been criminalized by Officer Nguyen's actions, became a symbol of the positive values that the community wanted to promote and protect. Her science project, which had been interrupted by the incident, eventually won the award for Best Presentation. But more importantly, her experience had sparked changes that would benefit all students in the district. The incident at Jefferson Elementary School's science fair would be remembered not just as an example of injustice, but as a demonstration of how communities can come together to protect their children and promote the values of dignity, respect, and equality that make education possible and meaningful. In the months that followed, Brielle continued to excel academically and to help her classmates with their studies. Her experience had been traumatic, but it had also revealed the strength of the support system that surrounded her and the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary change when they witness injustice. The science fair, which had been intended as a celebration of learning and discovery, had become something even more significant: a demonstration of the community's commitment to protecting and nurturing all of its children, regardless of their race, ability, or circumstances. It was a lesson that would be remembered and retold for years to come, inspiring other communities to stand up for what's right and ensure that justice and dignity prevail over prejudice and assumption. Angela Thompson, reflecting on the incident months later, would say that while she never would have chosen for her daughter to experience such trauma, the community's response had shown her something powerful about the capacity for ordinary people to create extraordinary change when they witness injustice and decide to act. The science fair had ended with awards and recognition, but its most important lesson had been about the power of community, the importance of speaking up for what's right, and the strength that comes from standing together against injustice. The story of Brielle Thompson and the Jefferson Elementary School Science Fair would continue to inspire educators, parents, and community leaders for years to come, serving as a reminder that the most important lessons are often learned not from textbooks or presentations, but from the actions of ordinary people who choose to do the right thing when it matters most.